Good evening and welcome to the second installment in our series where we discuss leadership, the leadership issues that are going on in the Caribbean region and across the world. My name is Marjorie Wharton, and I am one of your hosts for this evening. And joining me is my colleague and good friend, Sonia Lane. Hi, Sonia. How are you doing?
I'm good. How's everyone
Okay.
doing? Yeah.
It's been an interesting week and it's only Tuesday. So I'm sure everybody is having some interesting times with their work. So today we are going to be talking about the trends that are reshaping the workplace. And I think we're going to have a good discussion because we are coming at it from the perspective that there's some things that we're already seeing. As a matter of fact, when I put up the topic and started to talk about the future of work, there were some people who were saying this is not so much the future as this is already what they are experiencing. And then to some people, maybe there are some trends that we are not even taking into consideration, but really they're already beginning to see an impact. So
Mhm.
we opted to go for this topic this week because we felt that this is one that really needs to be discussed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I like that point that we're already seeing it. So are these trends, but we're not. It's coming faster
Yeah.
than we are ready or we're prepared for. So it's still a trend that yes, we're almost already behind, but it hasn't fully hit us. So it's still something that we need to pay attention to.
Yeah, and so to some extent, it's emerging. And part of our really impetus for this topic this week
Mm-hmm.
was there was an article that we found, which was produced in HBR, Harvard Business Review. And it was talking about the top trends that we are seeing emerging in work for 2022, which means that just like we said, to some extent, they are emerging. And in addition to those, we know that we have been seeing information from the WEF, World Economic Forum, talking about the future of work, talking about the changes that we're seeing. Gallup at Work has been doing research on it. And generally, there is an accepted perspective that the way we have been working has gone through a massive transition and it's not going to go back to the way that it used to be. And so we all, as organizations everywhere in the world, have to be prepared to deal with the reality that we are now facing and what is likely to come in the near future. So we wanted to start talking about and really to use this article, and I will put the article in the comments after the session. But we really wanted to start talking about that for our topic today and really say, are we prepared and are we doing everything that we need to do in order to deal with these trends as they emerge and put ourselves in the best possible position? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So having seen the article, Sonia, what are your thoughts on maybe how relevant those are to areas outside of the US? Do you think that because the research was done by Harvard and it does reference US organizations, that maybe it is something the rest of us don't have to worry about? Or do you think it's something that we have to bear in mind? Because I have my perspective, but what's yours?
Do I? Well, I think that it's global. We deal with a global world. We have global clients who are often, I have global clients who are often in different countries. And I think what they have hit upon and narrowed upon are very much global trends,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of who you are. I think what may be common, and we probably will need to get into this, is that organizations are still trying to, after the pandemic, they're still trying to get back to the old way of
Mm-hmm.
work, and they still haven't realized no, that's not going to work. It's not going to be good for long term or even the short term, and you find that employees are resisting. But I don't think that because the research is US centric that it
Mm-hmm.
does, that there are not critical, insightful points that people residing outside of the US cannot take on and
Yeah.
utilize.
And I agree with you on that because I think what they have found, perhaps they're shining a slightly different lens on it, but I think it really is a conversation that we are having in the Caribbean region and we are hearing coming out of Europe, and we're hearing it from other places around the globe. There is a big war on for talent. We talk a lot about the great resignation. And so while the US may have dubbed it that, it was not only happening in the US, we also heard about it in other parts of the world. We have heard about it even in the Caribbean, perhaps not to the same extent, but there are a number of people out there who are making the decision that they no longer need to be in an environment that they are not comfortable and they're not happy with, and they don't feel fulfilled. They don't feel like they're using their talents to the best of their abilities. And there's a lot of discussion about why that is happening and what is causing it. But in the end, it really means that now organizations almost have to be able to convince the employee to take the job. And so employees are getting to a point where they're saying, okay, you know what? I have options. I don't need this. And it's no longer the employer's market. It's no longer the buyer's market. It really is the seller's market now, where the employees can say, all right, sorry, you're not meeting my needs. I'm not interested.
For some, for a certain target group of
Mm-hmm.
white collar employees specifically, I agree. And I think it comes out from what the pandemic revealed to us. One of the things the pandemic had revealed was that you needed to be flexible. So it means that you have to go back. People realize I could do my work without having to go into an office. I can navigate and I can, spend a lot of more time. And so when they realize that, I feel like that contributed a lot to this rise, this struggle with having talent, because then people realize, well, I have options.
Yeah.
The way doesn't have to. They kept telling me this could work. Now we know it could work when it needs to. And so for employers who are trying to get people back to the old way of working, because obviously it was easier, we understood how to conduct business in that way, so we want to get back there. The employees are now going, no. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I was really interested in reading this statistic where for the conference board, they said 84% of organizations hiring professional and office workers are struggling to find talent, and
Yeah.
increased 60% in April 2021.
Yeah.
I
And
feel like, yeah.
And and what's interesting is that that doesn't seem to be changing. So it's not like the pandemic has gone on, and as you've seen it gone on, that it has slowed down. It almost has been maintained, or it's speeding up. More and more people are seeing, okay, I have other options and I don't have to take this. And so that war for talent that we have seen in the research means that sometimes employers are being forced to increase the compensation that they're offering to talented employees in order to get them to even consider the jobs that they're offering them.
Yeah, but for some of my clients, that is not even it.
Mm-hmm.
You for some people, you can't even match the amount of money, because some companies, those big companies, they have lots of money to throw around,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this is why I say, what does this trend mean, where you're having whatever the great resignation or the war for talent, or it's a really stiff competitive market out there. And organizations have to understand that it's going to cement this trend, which is
Mm-hmm.
people want flexibility. That is a must. That is no
Yeah.
longer an option, or we can consider. No, I need flexibility. So you can throw as much money at me as you want, and I'm not coming, because that's now very, very important for me. And when I come, I want to feel like I belong in this remote hybrid
Mm-hmm.
world. Not only they say they want flexibility, but they want you to, as the organization, to be good at them feeling that sense of belonging, that sense of camaraderie, that sense of I get a high touch feel from you, that I matter. And so for organizations, what that means is that they have to undertake massive, not only upskilling for their managers, but complete retooling of their systems to figure out, how can I offer flexibility and yet a high touch approach
Yeah.
where people, they matter, like they belong, like they're part of a team in this
Mm-hmm.
remote world. So I feel that that's a double whammy for organizations, that if they're not prepared to recognize and accept that it's happening, because most
Mm-hmm.
are too far trying to just get people to go back. It's over. Accept it and get towards upskilling your managers so they can lead in this hybrid world, retooling your systems so that you
Mm-hmm.
attract these employees that you so desperately need.
Yeah, absolutely. And what the research has also shown, as you're saying, is that there are a lot of employers out there because it is difficult. It is more challenging to manage that remote or that hybrid work environment, that a lot of organizations are trying to force or require their employees to come back into the office to work again. And so for a lot of people, they're not taking that option. I was having a discussion recently with a client, and she was explaining that she does not want to have to travel for meetings anymore. And so that's part of the discussion that's going on in the organization. And in
Mhm.
spite of the fact that, we have different variants now, and you perhaps may have to worry less, she doesn't feel comfortable having to go through that in order to do something when it could just as easily be done in a remote or virtual way. And so you still have a lot of that going on in spite of the changes, because now, as you said, people now know that it works. I remember in 2019 working with an organization which the employees were asking for them to consider remote work. And in 2019, they said it could not be done. There was no way the organization could figure out how to get it done. But by March 2020, when it was required, they all got it done. They got
Yeah.
the computers available, they got the network to work, they got people to get access so that they could do what had to be done. So sometimes it is just a mindset shift that is required. So just as you're saying there, this idea that you want to force people to go back to the way that it used to be, there's a big mindset shift that organizational leaders need to have.
So they need to, so because we're discussing the trends, but we're also going to say,
Mm-hmm.
what does it mean? What do you do with this trend? And I
Mm-hmm.
I love that story you just brought up, because people with disabilities have been asking for what we're doing right now for so
Yeah.
many years, and we keep telling them it can't work. And now, and we shut off such a important employee group that could add great value to organizations because of that. So I completely agree. So what does this mean? It means that, number one, as you say, the paradigm shift, that mindset shift, needs to happen with organizational leaders to understand it's not going back, no matter how
Mm-hmm.
hard. And so if you're mandating employees come in it's just alienating them.
Yeah.
And the good ones are going to leave.
Yeah.
And so what you're going to be stuck with, and whenever I do change projects, this is what happens when people are not proactive in communicating, and when they're not proactive in ensuring that people are engaged in the change, is like they somewhat are, it's unspoken. We hope that the ones that we need to get rid of leave, and the good,
Mm-hmm.
so that people will stop. No, it's always the good employees, the absolute employees that you need the most in the area of your business that makes the most money, that self-select out. Because as you said at the beginning, Marjorie, they know they have choices.
Yeah. And
They
if they're
have all.
not happy and they don't feel valued and they're not getting the flexibility that they need, because I know employees who've left organizations in spite of the good pay. So,
Mm,
and for years as a trainer, as somebody teaching leadership development, I've had to say to managers, in spite of the fact that they often believe that employees are motivated only by money, there are many employees out there who leave jobs that are high paying just because they're not happy in the job, because it's too stressful, because it's not allowing them to get the kind of freedom, flexibility that they want. And so that is why we are seeing more of it now, when people really realize how quickly, and so many
mm.
people are saying this, how short life is and how quickly you can lose the people that you love. So it's like it shifted people's mindset. So I absolutely agree with you.
I love that part that you just said there, because
Hmm.
a coach, that's who I deal with, people who need to find that freedom and flexibility. I show them how to.
Hmm.
But organizations, to keep employees, need to also help employees to figure that out. And so you
Hmm.
need tooling, you need systems, um, software, apps that reduces the divide, that you're not in the same room. So how do we reduce that divide, that distance? and bring together. As you say, clients, people don't want to travel anymore because for some people, it's very unsafe to do that. And for some of us, we're not going into a room full of people masked, no matter what people say. And some other people, they're like, wow, woohoo, I don't have a problem with this. I'm so happy to finally see people. And so how do you manage, that separation right there is you create that technology, you create those systems, you create those norms that help you to bridge that divide. And that means upskilling and it means retooling for those areas. So if a leader is out there looking right now and want to know where to start with that, the flexibility, the hybrid work that is needed to enable employees to come to you and then give you their best.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned individuals with disabilities or challenges, and the fact that for years we've been hearing from them about the fact that the environment did not fully accommodate their needs. Now, one of the things that this research from Harvard talked about was DEI, so diversity and engagement and inclusion. And I know that you are a specialist in that area. And so when I saw that, I figured that immediately jumped out at you and that you had some perspectives on that. Now,
Absolutely.
in the region, we tend to think that we don't have to worry about DEI so much because we are all one race or the majority one race. And so we think we don't have to deal with the race issue, but we still do have the issues of gender. We still have issues with related to able-bodied versus people who are not. We even have personality diversity. So what are your thoughts on what organizations need to be considering or remembering as they plan how to deal with these trends moving forward?
Yeah, this is another big one that if organizations don't get it right, they are going to really suffer. I mean, there's no doubt
Mm-hmm.
about it. All the research tells you that growth, growing your customer base, bringing in new oceans. If we go back to that whole strategy, blue
Mm-hmm.
ocean, whatever, requires that you reach out to the diverse markets and you bring them in.
Mm-hmm.
It's really critical that you understand. And what the trend shows is that it's going to go badly if you are not deliberately and intentionally crafting DEI policies, ensuring that DEI is in your systems, that is embedded in your culture and in the DNA of your organization. And
Mm-hmm.
there really critical areas that I like to highlight. The first one is that research always shows that for Black people, people of color, BIPOC people, however you refer to yourself, the remote world was wonderful because it meant that you didn't have to be subjected to racisms and microaggressions and discriminations. It reduced that significantly for you. And so coming back into work stresses people. And we'll go on to talk about another trend, which is really important, which is the mental health and well-being of
Mm-hmm.
employees. So critical. And so that's one area in which, so this, again, this incessant drive by organizations to bring people back to work because that's all they know. And that's what they, rather than developing and getting the new skills, is problematic for your diverse employees. It's so much better. However, research also shows that leaders tend to rate and prioritize people who are face to face.
Yeah.
And so it's in terms of DI issues, that says that you have to do a lot of upskilling for your leaders to number
Mm-hmm.
one, ensure that they understand what microaggressions are. If you don't know what it is, Google, read one of my posts, and there are lots of DI experts on LinkedIn. Go read up on some of those. That you have to upskill your employees and your leaders to ensure that we're reducing this, and people don't necessarily have to retreat home to ensure that they feel their mental health is keeps up, and then also train leaders on how to rate people and not have that just because they're here, I rate
Yeah.
them, see them often as such. So that's the first thing. And then there's the second thing. There's so much going on in the world that employees want to hear from leaders on these issues. So when something happens, so for example, we had the recent mass shooting in Buffalo. Employers have to figure out, well, do I need to say something to my employees?
Mm.
So they have to have criteria when it comes to these social issues. So before, social issues was such a great separation. It happened. We talk about it, in the corridors, and then we went back to work. But in today's world now, after George Floyd's murder,
Mm-hmm.
people understand that it's no longer good for me to say, for example, me as a Black woman, to see such a mass murdering happening, and then I'm expected to come back to work and operate as if nothing has happened, as if this isn't a heavy burden, as if it's not impacting my ability to think. And I want to know what my leader is thinking about that if I was an employee, for example. And
Mm-hmm.
so organizations are going to have to determine, since there's that blending of what was political and social, etc., what issues do I speak out on to my employees and which issues do I not? And so
Mm-hmm.
that they're going to have to get really ahead of, so that they have a system in place, a decision-making criteria in place, so they can get it right for those employees. Because again, you work really hard to get them, to
Yeah.
attract, to get the best. You don't want to drop the ball by making them feel that you are not interested, or you're just doing a check the box activity for DEI.
Yeah.
So go on forever with this issue. As you know, I think this is a great issue for organizations, that when they get it right, they can
Yeah. It's amazing when they get it right.
do such good things. I mean, DEI is messy, of course. It's that beautiful mess that I love to say
Mm-hmm.
happens, and I love a messy kiddo. Whether you're doing strategy or project, this is where you get, when you stay there and you do it right, the
Mm-hmm.
outcome side is beautiful. So those are the two issues, and I think that
Yeah.
leaders should think
And
about.
And so I would add on to that. And I think that maybe these are the two that perhaps come up a lot in the region and perhaps are not addressed or not dealt with. And I will talk about the diversity when it comes to gender and the diversity when it comes to personality. And the reason why I say gender is because, and I know that there are a lot of women in organizations who really do not think that this is an issue that they need to spend any time on, because they're saying to themselves, well, yes, these things happen, but whatever, you deal with it and you keep rolling. But
Mhm.
there are a lot more people who are in a position where they cannot just deal with it and keep rolling, where they do wind up in a position that they feel like they're being disadvantaged and like they do not have enough support in order to get things done. And so they have to make different choices. And a lot of that has to do, and there's a lot of research about that out there. The university, UWI, was doing research about it. The gender studies unit does a lot of research and talks about it. The fact that women play different family roles at different times in their lives means that they often do not have the same opportunities that their male counterparts might have. So
Yeah.
when their male colleagues have the opportunity perhaps to take the project and to travel and do work late and stay the hours and so on, and not be encumbered by any caregiver role, that very often female employees have some caregiver role that they have to undertake, whether it's for children or it's for parents or it's for spouse. And so it can have an impact on their ability to take on certain kinds of work, to harness certain opportunities that might be presented to them. And very often, just as you say, that leaders make decisions on the basis of whether or not a person's in the organization. Sometimes they're using the same criteria: how willing a person is to step up and do the extra work, how willing they are to be in the office, or how willing they are to take on the project that requires travel. And they use that as the criteria to make the decision on whether that's a high performing employee or not, versus maybe looking at the results. They look at the process for getting the results as well. And sometimes it can put women at a disadvantage.
Yeah, and the research that they quoted showed that Women are underutilized a lot because childcare is not some organizations think about to
Mm-hmm.
assist needs. And so when you're talking about trying to, convince and attract employees, those great employees that will give you the creativity to get the innovation, to get the growth that you need in this environment that's
Mm-hmm.
constantly changing. There's a specific type of employee that you absolutely need when you're an employee. It's a person who understands that their job is changed, who doesn't retreat when things are shifting, but who lean in and look for opportunities. And
Mm-hmm.
so you are looking for that employee, and they are female or male. I just went to my trainer, and he had the child care for the day. So I had a 1-year-old judging me as I just. I kid you not, Marjorie.
Harsh critic.
He literally
Harsh
looked
critic.
at me like, and so it's not just women, but it's also
Yeah.
men. More and more men who are quite rightly taking an active and role in the development of their children. When you don't address something that is critical to them, then as the research in the article show, you left them off. And as you just indicated, it's
Mm-hmm.
tremendous impact. In
Yeah.
today's world, with these fluctuations, these different volatile, dynamic situations, you can't, and you're looking for talent, and you are not having these discussions, then you are, what do you call it? Trying to approach something and tying your hands.
Yeah, you're
You
shooting yourself in the foot.
want to be boy. you
Yeah.
know yes, you're really doing a disservice to yourself. You're really pulling yourself back. And
Mm-hmm.
you and I, Marjorie, work with leaders, particularly when we get to strategy, who are trying to build capacity, who are trying
Mm-hmm.
to ensure that how do we get growth with limited ability, with limited resources. How do we
Mm-hmm.
these people, because we don't, these are the areas that you want. And this is why HR plays such a critical role, because when you're having your talent acquisition and your and well, I'm not saying the person is lazy as in the comments here, but they're really holding themselves back. Then you should
Mm-hmm.
sitting with HR and creating a recruiting and talent acquisition package that lets people know, hey, we understand the challenges that you're coming from with, and we're here to help you address them so you
Mm-hmm.
can at work and you can thrive and we can thrive.
Absolutely. And I think more and more as the employers and organizational leaders understand that you really have to see that you have to cater to employees in order to win them over. I think you will have more and more of those conversations happening where it is no longer felt like, well, if they want the job, they will come. If they want the money, they will come.
Yes.
And
So the comment here is that we're saying they may be lazy, but in reality, and I say this in my book, they say, people are our best. No, but they treat people like they treat the computer and the building. That's how they treat people. Like, okay, I give you lots of money. I bought you, put you there, plug you in, so you should work. And it doesn't work like that. It does
yeah,
not.
yeah. And so that I think allows me to dovetail to the other diversity point that I think we have to pay a lot of attention to. And we've seen it a lot more during the pandemic, and that really is personality. And the reason I say that is the majority of organizations are really set up for the individual's personality who is outwardly energized. So the person who enjoys engaging, the person who enjoys working collectively, the person who likes talking, the person who likes going to meetings, the person who wants to be up and going and excited and being involved in everything. There are some environments where perhaps that is not valued and the quiet is valued more, But more often than not, to show that you are engaged in an organization, you are expected to be engaging, which means that you have to be extroverting. And so a lot of people who really loved the fact that they were working from home during the last 2 years have been people who are introverted, because it allows them to have more control over their environment. They're not constantly being bombarded by people just walking up to their office to just have an impromptu meeting. They don't have to, the phone ringing every 5 minutes and they have to answer it because somebody just wanted to ask a question to find where something was on the system that they could have found themselves. And so for a lot of people who were introverted, it became a more satisfying work experience. And
Mm.
so, as the call to go back into working in the organization is coming out, for a lot of people, they're losing something that allowed them to be very productive. And there's some resentment, there's some increase in stress, there's some, fear, because you had it so good and now you're going back into this challenging and trying environment. And so, organizations need to understand that you have diverse personalities, and you are going to have people who are going to have different needs in order to be their most productive, their most energized, and to be able to work as part of the team. And so, I mean, I talk about that all the time because I talk about the MBTI, Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, which is a personality assessment. But it is something that is important because it impacts on your productivity.
Yes, yes.
Mm.
It is true. And when we talk about in DEI, when we talk about diversity, we say, well, don't narrow it just to race, gender, and
Hmm.
we want the full spectrum, because the seen and the unseen, because you want people to walk into work, and we say this now, to feel comfy, comfortable bringing their entire self to work. And when you bring your entire self to work, then, and this is what we always say to people, to companies, when they start with diversity, equity, and inclusion, that inclusion and equity are so very much important, because when you
Hmm.
bring all these people together with their different personalities, backgrounds, approaches, styles, you are absolutely correct. Then how do you ensure that they're gel and that they are all appreciated? Because a good part of leadership is understanding that
Hmm.
every single person you on your team have to understand, number one,
Hmm.
where they're going and what's their role of getting there.
Yeah.
And that we're interdependent, because sometimes we all think that, oh, something is going bad over there, but that's not me, that's a you problem, that's not a me problem. And it's like we're all interdependent here.
Yeah.
If you go down, I go down. I might just go down 2 minutes later. And so you are absolutely right. And when you talk about that, it just draws to memory. I think it was Trader, and someone was explaining how they were being rated down because they were too quiet in meetings. So they
Hmm.
were in a leadership position, a promotion, and the person said, "Well, their leader tells them that you're just too quiet. You don't talk in meetings." And she's highly introverted, and because I am an extrovert, that when you get a bunch of extroverts in a meeting with introverts, we talk all over everybody.
Yeah.
So you're thinking and then you speak, but then when you're about to, we're like extroverting all over, we talk over you. And so unless we have the self-awareness to know that, like when I'm running a meeting, I am aware that I'm an extrovert. It hits my head, it comes out my mouth. I may reclaim it 2 minutes later and say, nah, never mind what I just said.
Hmm.
Um, I have to create a space for the person who is introverted.
Yeah.
I have to not be uncomfortable with silence and not blame some person if I'm in a meeting with them and I feel like there's just too many silent spaces here. I have to get comfortable with that. So I hear what you're saying, and I think those are more of the issues that I deal with in DEI, those
Yeah.
personalities, those approaches, those clashes, um, that are then stereotyped and attached to a gender and a race or ethnicity as need be.
Yeah, and they are, as you say, they're stereotyped, and then they are seen in a negative light. And then individuals with those behaviors feel like there's something wrong with them. And so you are right that it is something that you find out, because I tend to have a lot of people that I'm coaching and I help them to understand that if you are introverted, you have a responsibility to speak up as well. Because the extrovert, matter of fact, nobody in the world knows what you were thinking if you're just sitting there thinking it. If you want somebody to know your opinion, you have to tell them. And so it really, as you say, is about both people working together. The extrovert to be aware that there's diversity in the room, and the introvert to own that diversity exists and therefore they have to do different, and the extrovert has to do different to find a way to live together. It's not that either one is better than the other. So neither one should vilify the other. Because, I have heard some introverts who say the problem with extroverts is they're always talking and they say the same thing over and over, and they take
Well,
over the meeting and nothing gets done. And all they do is talk, 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 talk. And then, yes, I've heard the extroverts say that the introverts sit there and they say nothing, and they don't contribute and they're not friendly.
oh no. Well, I can admit that as an extrovert, I can talk a lot and I have to say, all right, no, it's time for action. And I would agree that definitely for introverts, the understanding that there's more than one way to get your point over. So if
Yeah,
you're really stressed in terms of speaking up, if that really undermines you, then you can go where your strengths lie. Send a meeting after, an email after the meeting, or ask the leader to help create space for you to speak. As we have a great comment here, you have a responsibility and a right to speak up. Absolutely. And so if
absolutely.
someone, and what I would like to say grinds my gears, because you're right, people individualize it and then think they're probably no, it's a leadership problem.
Mm-hmm.
When a leader says to some person, you don't speak up enough, what they're actually saying is, I have not created the environment and the space for you to speak. That is an admission
Yeah,
of poor leadership right there. And so when you go to some person and then you just dump it all on them, that's not good leadership. It's like, let's work together and figure out how I can create that space for you, because I don't hear from you often enough. We talk about subtle acts of exclusions.
yep.
That is the biggest one. Someone is sitting in a meeting and not saying anything, and you don't even bother to say, hey, Marjorie, I haven't heard from you.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you like to say or
Yeah,
anything you like to add, and then sit there and give you the 7 seconds of silence
mm-hmm.
without pressure to think. And so
Yeah.
that's really, really important. Oh, I see
And
another.
so,
So
sorry, so
sorry
don't
about
lose your point, because I wanted to say this. And so that's why we are having these discussions, because we recognize that leaders have the responsibility to create this environment. Leaders are the ones who have to understand that this is what is happening and you have to prepare for it. The diversity has to be, you have to create an environment to allow the diversity to thrive if you're going to get the good employees, if you're going to be able to attract and keep the excellent talent that you want. And so that's why we have to keep talking about this, and we have to keep pointing to the fact that leaders have a responsibility. Part of leadership means that you cannot just simply blame the other person, but as a leader, what are you doing to solve the problem?
yes,
No,
I like
go
this.
ahead with your point.
Oh, so there's a great comment here. Creating a safe space for views to be expressed openly is important as well. That's one of the top jobs of a leader. Creating that safe space, that psychological safety, that feeling like I can come and say something to you from my perspective, my lived perspective. And
Mm-hmm.
in work, I say the person sitting next to you in the boardroom is having a completely different experience than you,
Yeah.
and both of you are having completely different experience, and that's okay. It's the bridging work of working together. So you have to create that safe space. And so
Mm-hmm.
I say it grinds my gears when people come to me and they are taking blame for what is poor leadership. The
Yeah.
leaders just don't know. I'm like, that is an admission. So both of you are ignorant. So you would think it's your fault. But what that is, a leader comes to me and say, I say it's an admission that I am a poor leader, and here is the result of it. I love that quote that you just put up.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry. Let's put it back. There you go.
Competence, because I use that a lot in gender bias. And the an author, why do so many why are there so many bad male leaders?
Mm-hmm.
Because there seems to be a perception that confidence is competence.
Mm.
And that is why, if you come across very confident, you may not know anything. And let me assure you that that obtains. I sit in rooms sometimes where people are extremely confident and they say things that tells you that they have no clue what's going on, but they say it with lots of confidence, and that takes you a long way. So that's one of the key things. Yes, confidence is not competence, but because people interpret confidence for competence, that,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's something that Marjorie and I, we have to say to our female coaching clients: you are competent, you
Mm-hmm.
are confident, and that
Yeah.
is okay. But don't mistake the fact that you don't feel confident for to mean that you're not competent. And for
Yeah.
a lot of women leaders, that's where they're meant to feel that way. You're feeling imposter syndrome because the systems are built for men, and therefore it pulls that from you. You're asked to prove yourself more. You're asked to demonstrate and explain much more. And so it's not really imposter syndrome, it's the gender bias coming out in the old systems that we have in our organizations that have not been rebuilt.
Yeah. And often nobody in the organization is really paying attention and seeing it that way. They are still, as you say, seeing it as a measure or a matter of competence. And so a lot of people who are introverted, the reason why they don't speak up is sometimes they're not sure about something, and so they're not willing to demonstrate it, and so as you say, they don't feel competent. And so part of the practice, I would say this to anybody who's introverted and listening, is that sometimes you have to be willing to put the half-baked idea out there into the world and accept and own that it's a half-baked idea where you haven't put all of your thought into it. Sometimes you're asked to give an opinion and you may have to say, I haven't had a lot of time to think about this. And so off of the top of my head, I will say, and you have to be willing to do that. And you say, but I can think about it more and come back with a better explanation, because that is also being willing to show that you have confidence in your ability to come up with a good idea. You
Yeah.
don't always have to have it perfect. And that's another thing I always say. You do not need to be perfect.
And that's brainstorming. And as a leader, when I'm leading meetings, one of the key things I love to say is that, because it's like, I want to hear your half-baked, not thought out ideas. This is a
Yeah.
brainstorming session, because you ask a question and people are silent. And then but when you phrase it in that way, then people start to speak up. And so the
Yeah.
person mentioned before that we have to create a safe space for views to be expressed openly. That is what it looks like when it's
Mm-hmm.
in action in leadership, when it's in action in DEI. Because when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion and access, it's the soil in which everything is planted. Whether you're talking about strategy, marketing, everything is planted in that. It's all about how do we include and get the best out of our people. And so it means when you're asking a question, you have to recognize that, hey, I feel, because most leaders think this, I have yet to feel, well, no, I should say that, because there are quite a few good ones that I am like, I will wake up any day and come work with you and your team because you're such a great leader. But most leaders think, well, of course we have an open environment. Of course it's safe to talk. Spoiler alert, as a consultant, you always know that that is not true when they're saying that. Because no good leader, every good leader understands that that may be your intention, but it is not necessarily in action. And so there's
Mm-hmm.
always an opportunity that someone doesn't understand that. And so when you're phrasing things, you're phrasing it from that point of view. Someone might be thinking, might be having a half-baked idea that may be great, that when we add to it, it's fabulous, but they're holding on to it. So let
Mm-hmm.
me make explicitly clear that I want to hear them now,
Yeah.
and that's environment. Oh, I see we have a comment. Do you want me to read it or do you put it
Yes,
up?
please go ahead.
Right. So here's the comment. I like the idea of being able to email or memo your ideas or thoughts if you are experiencing a level of anxiety when it comes to speaking it out. It allows you to still be heard. Absolutely. For people who are, and that happens, you may be introverted or you may not have power in the room. So you walk room, you're invited, but like you don't fully settle down and get comfortable. As we say, scotch into the scotch on the chair. To mic yourself, am I allowed here? Don't let them look at me because they might say, "What are you doing here?" and invite and escort you out. And so,
Yeah.
if you have any power or you don't feel comfortable, this is what you utilize. You then send that email or memo afterwards where you have good points. If you want to say something but you don't know when to interrupt, you send an email or memo or you have a little conversation with the leader, whichever one you're most comfortable with, to just have to say, I have some of these issues, and at the next meeting, can you just create a little space and help me to say and invite me to speak, because then you feel more comfortable. And so those are the things that Marjorie and I help you do when we're coaching. It is
Yeah.
really you navigate around what you're not necessarily comfortable doing, but you still have an objective. So how do you navigate around it?
Yeah. And I just want to say that I remember working with a group once, which had a leader and some of her followers in the room. And she was extroverted, we discovered, and everybody else on her team was introverted. And she
Mhm.
had a practice where she would call the team together, give them information, and ask them for their opinion or their input right there. And so she couldn't understand why the team never had anything to say. And it was so annoying to her and it was so upsetting to her. And why is it they weren't contributing? And so I remember helping her to understand that her team needs time to internalize before they could respond, and then saying to her that perhaps she needs to, well, not perhaps, she definitely needs to find the right process that will work for her and the team. So she needed to get their input. She didn't want to have to be reading a whole bunch of memos and then pulling things together. And so we negotiated, and the team was willing to do this. If she send, if she send, if she sends them the information ahead of time, and gives them, let's say, 15, 20 minutes to read it, and then pulls everybody together to discuss it, they were willing to work with that. So that was a compromise position. And so that says that leaders, you have to be willing to change your style. You cannot just say, well, this is how I am. This is how I work. This is what works for me. And you're a follower. So therefore you have to adjust your way of being to allow me to function effectively. Instead, you need to find ways that work for both of you. And that is what diversity, equity, and inclusion represents.
Yes, absolutely correct. It is a situation, and what you just talked about is really important when we talk about the hybrid or the remote world.
Mhm.
Uh, come together online, one of the things that you have to understand is that you don't have you come together online to have decisions, and so some of that brainstorming can happen afterwards.
Yeah.
Sorry, beforehand. And I
Mhm.
know in that particular example, the leader said, "Well, I don't really want to sift through all these things and come to
Mhm.
insights to bring to the meeting." Well, deputize somebody to do that, because
Mhm.
that are richer and people may be more comfortable to say something in writing or in a small group and not necessarily the big,
Right.
the big group. So
And
that's
so
all.
that's why I say the important part there in that, which is what a lot of leaders don't often allow to happen, is to get input from the followers, get input from your team. So the team agreed with the compromise position where they were okay with not having to, well, not giving it in written format once they had time to think it through ahead of time,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
apparently it was often a situation where they had to give a quick response. And then for the extrovert, she'd rather talk it through to understand it rather than read it by herself, sitting in her office with all these little emails coming at her.
Tell you
So,
something, extrovert, we get clarity through talking, and but
exactly,
we have to recognize as good leaders that is not just about us. As you say, that's what
exactly.
all about.
So
It's about
that's where you need the input from the team. You can't just sit there and say, well, I'm the boss. You have to do what I tell you. That's
you
the
know,
old way. And that's no longer working.
you know what? Nobody, everyone who's a leader goes, of course we don't do that. Yes, you do. You just don't call it that. You get overwhelmed. There's just so much going on, and then you get tired, and then you determine, okay, you know what? It's all on me to do, rather than do the work of being a good leader, which
Yeah.
means continuous learning, which means upgrading and reskilling to really handle all that is coming at you. Because
Yeah.
as I like to say, you have to be emotionally, mentally, and physically ready to lead. This is not something that you just take on unless you're willing to put in the work to learn to be a good leader. And that's why when you look around, there's so many organizations who are basically at this stage thinking, my goodness, we are not growing. We have limited resources and we need to grow and we can't figure out how. Let me tell you a good place to start. It's not retooling your strategy yet again. It is making your leaders better, because then they will get much more from their employees. That's
Yeah.
where you start. That's why you're stuck in that quagmire of where we need growth, we need innovation, we need creativity, but we have limited resources. And so we have that struggle. Better leaders, upskill them, get better
Yeah.
ones will happen, which then leads us into, I know we're running out of time, but it's really important that we talk about
Yeah.
that trend in mental health, Marjorie. And what
Yes. And that well-being, the
mhm.
fact that we are getting to a point where organizations have to understand that the well-being of the employee matters, and being able to measure that well-being is a key statistic now for the success of the organization. So if you have your employees in a position where they're not feeling valued and they're not feeling like they're being heard, and so they're not happy, they're under stress, then you are not in a position that you have a good sense of well-being among your employees. They're going to get, that's also what's making them take that step out the door.
Yeah. Oh, I see a comment here called that says the mirror. I'm not quite sure. Clarify so that we can expand on that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I wanted to give a quote, a statistic again from the conference board, which reveals that 58% of workers cite increased work hours or workload as taking the greatest toll on their mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone is feeling it. That situation that I just told you, which is we need growth,
Mm-hmm.
but we have limited resources. So everyone is taking on more and more and more. And so it's taking a toll on their mental health. They feel like I just can't do any more out there. And one of the key things that we understand is that employers are now spending lots of money in mental health well-being programs. I don't think that I go to any clients or any organizations, potential clients, where I can't sit with their benefits person and hear, this is what we're putting in place, this is what we're putting in place. I just read online just this week that an organization is saying you can expense meeting up with a colleague just to get together. Like
Mm-hmm.
you can expense, I think, up to $100. I can't remember which organization it is. But one of the key things that I want to say is that you have to address the disconnect between what organizations are offering and what workers actually feel is helpful. So
Mm.
employers are saying, well, we're looking at mental health well-being and we're giving you so many things that can help you with that increased workload, that sense of overwhelm, that sense of burnout. How are employees taking advantage? Are employees taking advantage of it? You will find that it's very low, the percentage of employees that are taking advantage of it. And that's because it's not matching what they want. They don't
Yeah,
want
and
to, go on.
I was going to say, and it's also important to know too that sometimes organizations may make these things available, but don't really give the employee the space to actually access them.
Well, that's true.
Because when you make it available that an employee can take mental health days if they need it to recover, but then you say to them, well, this deadline is important and it's urgent, and you go on and on about the deadlines and the work, then it means that in spite of the fact that a mental health day is available, you're really not giving them the space to take it when they need it.
And let me tell you, I'm about to interrupt. Sorry, extrovert
That's all
here.
right.
The leader doesn't take any.
Mm,
Oh, it's available to go to a coach. It's available to go to, but you are available to go to leave early on Fridays, but the leader is sitting there. Who wants to leave if
yeah.
their leader? Who wants to, take advantage of a mental health day if their leader never does? And so this is another way that we want to talk about being good leaders, because you set the tone. Oh, there's a comment. Oh, you were talking about where the transformation for good, effective leadership starts. Yes, that's true. Yes. And this is where we are right here.
Hmm.
Um, you set the example. If my leader says, I am taking a mental health day next week, or I'm taking one this week, then it says to me, oh, this is okay. All right. I can do
Yeah.
it.
And so that it becomes part of the culture of the organization. But if the leader never does it, then it's never seen as acceptable. And so then you can't just sit there and assume that other people aren't doing it. And so they're the problem. The problem starts, or the issue starts, with the leader and the example that they set.
That's a good point. I actually didn't
Mm-hmm.
think it's more going right directly to, well, you're giving them things that they don't want. You're
Mm-hmm.
telling them coming to work when they would rather stay home and be able to take a 15-minute break at 3 and go pick up their daughter from the school bus and bring them home, give them a snack, get them sorted out, and then get back to work. That's what they want. They don't want a
Mm-hmm.
coaching or a meditation session that they can. It's not what they want.
Yeah.
But no, you're like, you have to come into work, but hey, look at all these wonderful things we're providing for you.
Yeah.
They don't. When you look at organizations where people suffer vast microaggressions, outright racist actions, and then what they say to the employee is, well, you could actually take a month off with pay to recover.
Mm.
Literally. The organizations that do that, you could take mental health break. We're not going to fix our systems. We're not going to make them better for every single person. Because again, we
Yeah.
love to say this gender bias affects men too, negatively.
Yeah. Of
Talk
course.
microaggressions or racism, it affects every single person
Mm-hmm.
negatively, interdependent. You can't have a body where part of you is being attacked every day.
Yes. And you assume that the rest will be healthy.
Will be healthy. If
Yeah.
something is hacked every day, we are all invested in, for all of us to ensure that it is corrected and it's done in a way that is beneficial for the entire body and not just beneficial for your arm, right? It's for the
Yeah.
entire body, the entire employee groups that you have. So that's really important. Anyway, I'm going to stop here because I get excited about
That's
these.
all right. But I think that this is a very important topic. And I think we had a really great discussion. Yes, we're running out of time, or we've run out of time, but this is an important topic. And so I think what we've done here is really start the discussion. And so I would say to those of you who are watching this either live or in the replay, make your comments and keep the discussion going, and don't let it stop there. Talk to the leaders that you know. If you work in an organization, start talking about the fact that this is where work is going and this is where you want it to go, because you want it to get to a place where it is more positive, where it is creating a better environment for you to live in and work in. Because in the end, and we've been saying this for years, you bring your whole self to work. You don't just put your well-being somewhere on a shelf and come in as an automaton that's just going to focus on doing the computer work. You
Well,
still have the rest of your needs for satisfaction, for a sense of belonging, for a sense of happiness, for enjoyment. And you can't just assume, leaders, that if you just throw more money at the problem, that is going to solve the problem. And so what we realized is when we got to a point where organizations didn't have the money to just throw at the problem, suddenly they didn't know how to fix it and how to make employees feel more comfortable. And so employees now are showing that they are no longer willing to accept it. And so this is where the war for talent that we're seeing is going to emerge more and more. And even as there are people out there in the world who are saying that they can't find the kind of work that they want to do, there are a lot more out there that are moving on and they're finding opportunities. And if they move into a role and it's not satisfying, they move out of it and they go on to do something else. Or if they stay where they are, they do it for a determined period of time with a specific objective in mind. So I think it's important for us to note the biggest trend for us all to remember as we are going forward is that we need to create a better environment for employees to work in.
And it's
And and it's what did you
possible.
say? It's
Very much.
possible. Yes, it's possible. And if we don't do that, then we will never get the kind of productive environment and the competitive organizations that we say we want.
Yeah. I like to
Yeah.
say, definitely send this to your leaders so that, we if we can say it much better than you would, because it's essential that that too many organizations out there are too much stuck in the we need growth, we have limited resources, and everybody seems to be overwhelmed, leaning towards burnout.
Yeah.
And it's a solution to that exercise, but it's going to be an investment and not a transaction. And when I say
Yeah.
an investment, that you're going to build, you have to put in a lot of work before you see the payoff, but it will happen. And too many leaders are approaching it, and too many organizations are approaching it like it's a transaction, which is I hand you some money and I want to see immediate results. And that's
Yeah.
why you're stuck there. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So thank you very much, Sonia. Tell the people again how they can reach out to you if they want to get input, if they want to get feedback. Of course, we know your book, Workplace Anxiety, is available where all books are. They can get it from your website. They can get it from Amazon. I think you're also on, is it also on Apple Books, iBooks,
Yes.
whatever?
So
Right.
everywhere, don't send it to my
Right.
website.
Everywhere.
I don't really want to change it. I'm not a bookseller. So buy it from Apple, Amazon, wherever you buy your books, Barnes and Noble, that's
Okay.
you can reach me here on LinkedIn, by following me or connecting with me. Let's be friends. Or over on Instagram, Sonia Gartside, or go to my website and join my tribe, which is my mailing list. Just go on my website, soniagartside.com, and sign up for my mailing list.
Yeah. And for me, you can follow me on LinkedIn, Marjorie Wharton. You can follow my company page, Breakthrough Performance Coaching. And I'm trying to start a group on Facebook. So if you're on Facebook, you can join that as well. That's where I want to have the discussion and keep the discussion going. So the group is at BTP Coaching 246. So look for the group, join it, bring your questions, bring your comments, share your feedback. We need to keep doing all that we can in order to create better environments for us to work in. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. It's been a great discussion, Sonia.
Thank you so much, ladies. My time this evening was very well spent.
I am
You
very glad. Thank you very much for that feedback.
cool.
All right. So take care, all. Bye.
Bye.